Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. My name is Elena. I'm 34 years old, and right now, I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, trying to sort through the mess inside my chest. There's something I've been holding in, something gnawing at me for months, that I need to say out loud. Maybe hearing it will make it less sharp. Maybe not. You see, this story starts with a movie. I was watching a simple, silly rom-com on the couch, one of those guilty pleasures I used to love. But it wasn't just about the movie. It was about what happened next, when my stepmother walked in, saw me there, and did something I never expected. But before I get to that, I need you to understand where I was, emotionally, when it happened. A year ago, things with Mark, my husband, felt different. Safe. Sexy. Like we still had that spark, that magnetic pull. We used to steal kisses that sent shivers down my spine, not just out of habit but because we wanted each other. I remember the way his hand would find mine on the couch, fingers intertwining, squeezing just enough to remind me I was wanted. Those moments weren't perfect, but they were ours. Intimate in a way that made the rest of the world disappear. Lately, though, it's like the warmth has drained away. The kisses have become mechanical, like checking a box. Last week, he kissed me goodnight and pulled away too fast, his lips barely brushing mine. It left me craving something that wasn't there. Even cuddling feels different now, like I'm the one reaching for closeness while he stiffens, distant, as if my touch is a burden. I try not to think about it too much. I tell myself this is normal, that long-term relationships have their seasons, their ups and downs. But deep down, there's a growing ache, a subtle tension that won't quit. And then there are the hugs. What used to be a soft, reassuring squeeze has become something colder, almost like a demand for compliance rather than comfort. The other night, I wrapped my arms around him after a long day, desperate for that familiar connection. He hugged me back, but I felt nothing in his arms, just the hollow weight of distance. I started noticing the cracks creeping in slowly, like a thin ice layer forming on a lake, invisible at first but deadly when you step on it. I found myself holding back questions, avoiding conversations that might expose how far we drifted. Because once you name the distance, it becomes real. The exact moment I knew something had changed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost mundane, but it slammed into me like a wave. We were lying in bed, the room dim and still, the kind of silence that usually feels peaceful. I reached out to touch his face, hoping to bridge the space between us. His eyes met mine, but there was no fire there, only exhaustion, or maybe indifference. He pulled away gently, not roughly, but enough to make me pause. "I'm tired," he said softly. That was it. Not a plea for space, not a reassurance that it was temporary, just tired. Like I was asking for something he no longer had to give. I lay there, my hand still hovering near his cheek, and I realized I was losing him. Or maybe I was losing myself trying to hold on. That night, I turned on the TV to distract myself and found that old rom-com. It was ridiculous, but it reminded me of the way things used to be, light, easy, hopeful. And then she came in, my stepmother, who had always been a quiet presence in the background, and saw me watching it. What she did next shook me to my core, but that's a story for the next part. For now, I just want you to understand this: love isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes, it fades in the smallest moments, the kisses that don't reach your heart, the hugs that don't hold you, and the quiet realization that what you had is slipping away, piece by piece. And I'm scared. Scared of what's left when that warmth is gone. Mark's a firefighter. He's used to rushing into chaos, saving lives, and being the calm in the storm. That's how I always thought of him: strong, dependable, the kind of man who could carry the weight of the world without cracking. But I'm starting to see how that strength sometimes leaves little room for softness, for the things I actually need. After that night, the one when I realized he was pulling away, I found myself wanting more than just his presence. I needed him to see me, really see me. To understand that the way he showed love with quick touches or a tired squeeze wasn't enough anymore. One evening, I sat on the couch, curled up with a book, feeling a hollow ache inside. Mark came in after his shift, exhausted but trying to keep up appearances. He dropped his gear by the door and smiled, the kind of smile that said, "I'm home," but felt like a fragile mask. Without a word, he moved beside me and wrapped his arm around my shoulders. I leaned into him, expecting comfort, but the hug was tight, almost suffocating. His hand rubbed my arm, but it didn't feel like the gentle affection I craved. It was more like he was trying to fix something he didn't understand. I pulled back slightly, but he tightened his grip. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked, voice low but strained. I hesitated, struggling to find words that wouldn't sound like accusations. "I don't know. I just feel like we're not really connecting lately." He sighed, releasing me, and ran a hand through his hair. "I'm tired, Elena. The fire calls have been brutal. I'm trying, okay? I'm here." His presence should have been reassuring. Instead, it made me feel even more alone. I needed to tell him that his physical closeness wasn't enough, that I wanted to talk, to share, to feel safe emotionally before anything else. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I said, "I know you're tired. I'm tired too." He nodded, then kissed the top of my head, a quick, distracted gesture that felt like the last item on his to-do list. Later that night, when we tried to sleep, the space between us felt vast. He reached over, his hand brushing mine, but I didn't respond. It wasn't rejection, I just didn't have the energy to pretend everything was fine. The next morning, the misunderstanding grew. Mark, in his well-meaning way, tried to surprise me with breakfast in bed. Pancakes, fresh coffee, and a small note that said, "I love you." It was sweet, but when I looked at him, I felt a pang of frustration. "I appreciate it," I said quietly, "but I need more than pancakes right now." He frowned. "What do you want, Elena? Just tell me." The problem was, I didn't know exactly what I wanted. I just knew I needed him to slow down and listen. To hold me not because he had to, but because he wanted to. To talk about how we felt instead of pretending that busy schedules and small gestures were enough. I told him as much, but his eyes clouded with confusion and exhaustion. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted. "After everything I see at work, I just want to come home and feel like I'm doing something right." That hit me hard. I knew his job was demanding. The constant adrenaline, the danger, the pressure to be perfect, it weighed on him. But it also meant he had little energy left to navigate the emotional minefield between us. We stood there, two people wanting to connect but speaking different languages. Days passed with more of the same. Mark's hugs felt like attempts to patch a leak in a sinking boat, and my silence became a wall he couldn't climb. Neither of us knew how to bridge the gap, and I feared the distance was becoming permanent. It was in this haze of misunderstanding that my stepmother saw me watching that stupid rom-com. She caught a glimpse of something in my eyes I hadn't even allowed myself to admit yet. She didn't say anything at first, but the look she gave me, a mix of concern and something else, maybe recognition, shook me. I wondered if she saw the cracks in my marriage too, or if it was just me, alone with my doubts. Mark has always been the kind of man who shows love through touch. It's how he communicates, hands on my back, a squeeze of my waist, fingers threading through my hair. But lately, every time he reaches for me, something inside me pulls back, and I'm not sure why. Last night was one of those moments. We'd just finished dinner, and I was clearing the table when he came up behind me. His hand slid around my waist, pulling me close. I wanted to melt into him the way I used to, but my body stiffened, a quiet alarm going off in my head. He kissed my neck, soft at first, then a little firmer, and I felt myself shrinking away inside, even though part of me ached for the old warmth. "I missed you today," he whispered. "I missed you too," I said, voice barely above a sigh, but it felt hollow. He tightened his grip, and I flinched slightly, not because he hurt me, but because the touch felt like an obligation, a transaction rather than tenderness. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but my hands stayed at my sides, too uncertain to move. He pulled back, searching my eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked. I shrugged, unable to find the words. "How do you explain that your own skin feels like a stranger's? That a kiss that once made your heart race now leaves you numb?" Later, when we were on the couch, he gave me that familiar butt slap, the one that used to make me laugh and press back into him. This time, I barely reacted. The sound echoed louder than my silence. He noticed, of course. "You okay?" he said, voice gentle but edged with worry. I forced a smile. "Yeah. Just tired." But inside, frustration bubbled up. Why was it so hard to want him? To let go? I thought about all the times I'd longed for this closeness, and now, it felt like a performance. Like I was pretending to be someone I used to be. He leaned in again for a kiss, and I kissed him back, but my lips felt numb. No spark. No fire. When he pulled away, I saw the flicker of hurt in his eyes, and guilt stabbed through me. "I don't know what's happening to us," I whispered. He didn't answer. We sat there, side by side but worlds apart. Later, alone in the bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and let the silence swallow me. Why does everything have to turn into sex? Why can't we just be close without the pressure to perform, to prove we still care with a kiss or a touch? I want to want him. God, I do. But right now, I'm lost in the space between us, afraid, frustrated, and desperately lonely. We were supposed to have a quiet dinner, just the two of us. I had set the table carefully, lit a candle, hoping maybe tonight would be different. That maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. But as soon as we sat down, the tension settled like a thick fog between us. Mark was distracted, glancing at his phone, sighing every so often. I tried to start a conversation, anything to break the silence, but the words felt heavy, like pulling stones uphill. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Do you even want to be here?" I blurted, my voice trembling before I could stop it. Mark looked up, confused. "What?" "This," I gestured between us. "Us?" "This, pretending. You come home tired, I come home lonely. We're living together but not really living." His brow furrowed, a flash of frustration in his eyes. "I'm trying, Elena. What more do you want from me?" "More." That was the problem. I didn't know what more looked like anymore. Tears welled up suddenly, hot and fierce, and I covered my face with my hands. I don't know how to do this anymore," I sobbed. "I feel like I'm fading away. Like I'm invisible. And I hate it. I hate feeling like I'm alone even when you're right here." Mark reached across the table hesitantly, his hand brushing mine. "I didn't realize." "I thought you were okay," he said quietly. "I wasn't," I whispered. He stood up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe we need a break," he said, voice low and cold. Those words cut deeper than I expected. A break? Was that what we'd come to? "No," I choked out, shaking my head. "I don't want a break. I just want you to see me. To be here, really here." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, the anger faded from his eyes, replaced by something raw and uncertain. But the damage was done. The evening was ruined. Later, when I was alone in the bedroom, I curled up on the edge of the bed, the tears still damp on my cheeks. I thought about that night, the moment when my stepmother saw me watching that silly movie and did something so shocking it shook me. I realized then how much I'd been hiding, how much pain I'd buried beneath forced smiles and silent nights. I felt guilty for breaking down, ashamed for needing so much and still feeling so empty. But most of all, I felt confused, about us, about love, about myself. Was this really what long-term love was supposed to feel like? Or had we lost something precious along the way, something we didn't know how to get back? I didn't have answers, only questions swirling in the dark. And in that quiet, I made a silent promise, I wouldn't give up yet. Not without trying to find the pieces of myself, and us, that were still there, somewhere beneath the cracks. Days slipped past like shadows, stretching longer and colder between us. The house felt quieter, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Mark and I moved around each other carefully, like strangers navigating a shared space, afraid to make the wrong move. I missed him, God, how I missed him, but I didn't know how to bridge the growing gap. I reached out once, texting him a simple, "How was your day?" but it went unanswered. When I tried to bring up the things we'd left unsaid, he'd look away, his eyes distant, like I was asking for a secret he couldn't share. He seemed weighed down by something I couldn't touch, a heaviness in his shoulders, a tiredness deeper than exhaustion. Sometimes, I caught him staring out the window, lost in thought, the mask of strength slipping just enough to reveal a glimpse of his pain. It wasn't anger I saw, it was sorrow. A man carrying burdens too heavy to voice. I hated how I had started to view him as the problem when, really, we were both drowning in this silent sea. One evening, I found him sitting alone in the living room, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. When he looked up, I saw the cracks, his jaw clenched, eyes shadowed by doubt and regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, as if apologizing for the space growing between us. I sat beside him, hesitant. Me too. Neither of us knew where to begin, or if we could. The guilt settled in my chest like a stone. I was angry, yes, angry at the distance, at the loneliness, at the love slipping through our fingers. But beneath that was a raw ache. I longed to fix what was broken, to find a way back to the man I once knew, the man who held my hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. And yet, I was scared. Scared that the more I tried, the more I'd push him away. Scared that maybe this was the new normal, that the love we'd built was unraveling, thread by thread. Late at night, when the house was still, I'd lie awake and ask myself the hardest question, do I fight for us? Do I try to rebuild something that feels like it's crumbling? Or do I let go and find a way to heal alone? There was no easy answer. But deep down, I knew one thing, I wasn't ready to give up yet. Not on us, not on the hope that somewhere beneath this cold distance, there was still warmth worth fighting for. I don't know what made me go downstairs that night. Maybe it was the weight of the silence. Maybe it was the dull ache of missing him, even while sleeping just rooms apart. The living room was dim, lit only by the glow of the TV playing some late-night rerun. Mark was on the couch, his long frame curled awkwardly, one arm tucked under his head, the other draped across his chest. He looked younger like that, almost fragile, like the man I met years ago who used to make me laugh so easily. For a moment, I stood there quietly, watching him breathe. The heaviness in my chest tightened, but there was no anger left, only sadness. I walked closer, my footsteps soft on the hardwood floor. Without thinking, I reached down and gently pulled the blanket up over him. As I did, his eyes fluttered open, meeting mine. He didn't speak, and neither did I. The weight of everything unsaid hung thick between us. "Elena," he whispered, his voice dry and low, full of something I couldn't name. I sat on the edge of the couch beside him. He reached for my hand instinctively, and for a moment, I let him hold it. His thumb brushed slow circles across my skin, a familiar gesture that once felt electric. Now it just felt quiet. "I don't know how we got here," he said softly. I swallowed hard. "Me neither." He sat up slowly, his hand still holding mine. "I thought I was doing enough. providing, being stable. I didn't realize you felt so alone. I nodded, my throat tightening. I didn't realize how long I was waiting for you to notice. The honesty between us hung in the air like fragile glass, ready to crack at any second. He took a breath. Do you think we can fix this? That was the question that haunted me. I wanted to say yes, to believe there was a version of us that could heal. But as I looked at him, really looked at him, I saw how tired we both were. How much damage had been done not through cruelty, but through slow neglect. I don't know, I whispered. He leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead, gentle, almost reverent. My eyes stung. It wasn't passion, or desire, or even hope. It felt like goodbye. We sat there for a few more minutes, neither of us ready to move, as though we were trying to memorize the shape of what we once had. Eventually, I stood. Good night, Mark. Good night, Elena. I walked back upstairs alone, my chest hollow but strangely light, as if the truth had finally made room for something else. Not hope, not yet, but acceptance. Sometimes love doesn't end in flames. Sometimes it just fades into quiet spaces neither person knows how to fill. You know, I used to think that love was mostly about the big moments, the anniversaries, the kisses that took your breath away, the late-night confessions under the stars. And in the beginning, maybe it was. In the beginning, everything felt easy, natural, like gravity pulling us toward each other. But that's not where love lives. Not really. Love lives in the tiny spaces, the quiet glances across a room, the way you reach for each other without thinking, the comfort of shared silence. And just as easily, love can fade in those same spaces. One small neglect at a time. One missed conversation. One night of choosing exhaustion over connection. And then, one day, you wake up and realize you're lying beside someone who feels distant. Familiar, but distant. That's where we ended up. Not because we didn't care. Not because we were cruel. But because we thought love was strong enough to float without attention. I've spent so many nights replaying every moment, trying to figure out where I went wrong, where we went wrong. And the truth is messier than I wanted it to be. It wasn't one thing. It was everything. It was me biting my tongue when I should have spoken. It was him assuming my silence meant I was fine. It was both of us being afraid to admit we were lonely. Desire, that's another cruel twist. No one tells you how desire changes. That you can love someone deeply and still feel empty in their touch. That the ache inside you isn't always for sex, but for being seen. Fully seen. Desired not for your body, but for your heart, your mind, your complicated soul. There were nights when Mark touched me and I recoiled, not because I didn't want him, but because I wanted him to want all of me. To ask how I was doing before reaching for my skin. I wanted him to choose intimacy over habit. Connection over routine. And I think he wanted that too. He just didn't know how. That's the part that hurts most. He wasn't a bad man. He never was. He was simply a man who thought showing up physically was enough. That paying the bills, hugging me goodnight, and telling me I love you filled the gaps. But love isn't maintenance. It's presence. It's noticing. It's asking the uncomfortable questions, even when you're afraid of the answers. In the end, we didn't fall apart in one explosive fight. We just stopped holding each other tightly enough. Mark and I still talk, sometimes. There's a strange kind of peace between us now. Not quite friendship. Not quite love. More like two people who once shared everything and now share a quiet understanding. I'm learning to forgive both of us. To forgive myself for staying quiet too long. To forgive him for thinking I didn't need more. And I'm learning something else, too. I'm learning that it's not selfish to want to be seen. To be chosen, fully, every day. To want emotional intimacy that feels safe, not forced. I used to think that kind of love was rare, something only teenagers felt in movies. But now I believe it's possible. Hard, yes. Fragile, always. But real. If I ever love again, I know what I'll need. Not perfection. Not endless passion. But softness. Curiosity. Someone who sits with me in silence and still feels close. Someone who touches my hand not because it's habit, but because they truly want to be near me, even after all the years have dulled the fireworks. Love isn't what you promise on your wedding day. Love is what you choose in the quiet. And if you stop choosing, one day you'll find you're holding hands with a stranger. That's what I learned. And somehow, even with the sadness of it all, I feel free.